Hello, ladies and gentlemen, and all. Welcome to this evening's Magistrates recruitment event. I would also like to say hello to all who cannot be with us for this evening's live event and are instead watching the recording. To protect your privacy, we have muted and turned off the cameras for those attending. You will hear tonight from a range of speakers, and at the end of these, there is an opportunity for questions. If you have any comments or questions during the event, please put these in the chat function, or at the end you will see a web link and an email that you can ask those questions as a follow-on. Thank you all very much for your interest and your time. We are so pleased that this event has proved so popular, and the Magistrate Service is hoping to hold more of the events such as this in the future. On a personal level, in fact, I am totally thrilled that so many of you have applied here in Portsmouth. We have been through such a difficult and momentous time. Now is an opportunity to make a difference and help make society fairer for your family, community, and the ordinary general public. It is important that we feel that justice is fair and we can in some way identify with those doing the judging. So that is why recruiting the right people is so important to represent you, the real general public. So I'm really hoping that many of you now or later, or your family or friends, take up this important chance to help represent our modern society. So it could be you. The magistrate is a voluntary position that can really make a difference to your local community. The Magistrate Service is committed to making magistrates truly representative of the whole of Portsmouth and are keen to recruit new members from underrepresented groups, and we strongly encourage and welcome applications from all sections of our community. The purpose of tonight's event is to 1. Find out more about the role. 2. To hear firsthand from magistrates about their magisterial journey and experiences sitting as magistrates. 3. Find out about the interview process. And 4. And why you could be a magistrate. Before we start, I would like to introduce our speakers and detail the agenda. First, we'll be hearing from the Lord Lieutenant of Hampshire, Nigel Atkinson, the future Lady Mayoress of Portsmouth, Joy Maddox, and Portsmouth citizen Taka Jaffa, who will tell us a little about their experiences of being magistrates in the city. Following Joy and Taki, 3 serving magistrates will talk about the process and their experiences. We will have questions and answer sessions with our speakers, so please have your questions ready. Now let us get started, and I will hand over to the Lord Lieutenant of Hampshire, Nigel Atkinson. Nigel.
Thank you. Lord Mayor, ladies and gentlemen, thank you very much for inviting me today to say a few words at the start. Lord Mayor has given a fantastic summary of what we're hoping to achieve by tonight, and indeed a little bit about how important the role of a magistrate is within the community. My job is Lord Lieutenant of Hampshire, and I am Her Majesty the Queen's personal representative in the county. And the fundamental principle concerning the office of Lord Lieutenant is that he or she is Her Majesty's personal representative, and consequently, my first and foremost duty is to uphold the dignity of the Crown. Now, in this role, I support Her Majesty the Queen and the royal family, and her particularly in her capacity as head of nation, in which the sovereign acts as a focus for national unity, pride, identity, and also gives us a sense of stability and continuity. And of course, one of my jobs is to help officially recognise success and excellence within the county and to support the ideal of voluntary service. And of course, being a magistrate is one of the key roles of voluntary service. Now, one of my jobs is to be president of the Magistrates Advisory Committee, and we are responsible for the recruitment of JPs. And so therefore today is a very important evening as far as I'm personally concerned. From the earliest days, the Lord Lieutenant has been very closely associated with the magistrate. And indeed, until the 19th century, the Lord Lieutenant appointed the Clerk of the Peace. As we've heard from the Lord Mayor, JPs do a very, very important and necessary job. And they do give up a great deal of time in a totally unselfish manner. And the role constantly changes as needs of society evolve. And of course, we'll carry on doing so in the future. Now, last night, I listened to a webinar interview with a young black man called Lee Lawrence. Now, Lee was 11 years old when his mother was sadly shot by the police in front of him, and he couldn't really understand it. And she sadly was in a wheelchair for the rest of her life. Now, Lee looked after her for 26 years as her full-time carer. I do recommend you Google this chap, and actually he's written a book about his experience. But what I'm hugely impressed with is the way that he turned his life around. He doesn't have, certainly said he's had aggression, he's had all sorts of problems, but he's overcome them. And he now helps with the police and with the young people of Brixton, which is where he lived. And of course, it was because of his mother's shooting that the Brixton riots took place all those years ago. Now, you may wonder why I mention this, particularly since I only heard it this time last night. What was fascinating to me was he'd never thought about being a JP. And the question came up, how do you like to be described? Do you like to be BAME? Do you like to be black? Do you like to be whatever? And he had the most wonderful answer. And it was, I want to be treated like everyone else. And he said, I'd never thought about being a JP because I didn't think people like me were JPs. I thought you had to take exams, and I thought it was different people in society to me. Now, how wrong he is and was. And we are looking for people from all walks of life. We're not bothered about your religion, your gender, your color, your background, whatever it is. We want people to be representative of the community. I mean, I was actually knocked out by this guy, and I went straight on Amazon and bought his book because I thought he was so incredible. He ended up by saying, I hadn't thought about this. I want to help with law and order. And he will probably be submitting an application to be a JP. I don't know where he lives, but it was stunning. And it is such a rewarding position and such an important role in the community. All of you who are listening, and I'm very grateful to see so many names on my screen, I cannot recommend this role more highly. And you'll hear now from 3 magistrates who will tell you about the process, and 2 past magistrates who have a huge amount of experience. So, Lord Mayor, thank you very much. And I'm very much looking forward to hearing the talks and indeed seeing some of the questions that you hopefully will pose later on in the evening. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lord Lieutenant, for that enthusiastic and supportive and passionate speech there. I thought that was brilliant. Thank you. I'm now next going to hand you over to Joy Maddox, who's a serving magistrate and the Deputy Lady Mayoress. Joy will be taking the reins from me later on. This is to show that we have continuity and we're supporting this, despite whoever's the Lord Mayor and incumbent at that time. Joy.
Thank you. Good evening. I'm really pleased to be part of this event. Magistrates have been, as we know them, have been administering justice for over 650 years. And I am very proud and privileged to be part of that, serving justice on behalf of the Crown. And a bit like Mr. Lawrence, to be honest, I never really considered becoming a magistrate because I thought you had to be either very wealthy or very highly educated, of which I'm neither. And so when I actually did find out that no, you don't need to be either of those things, you can be, but you don't need to, and that ordinary people could apply, I thought, oh, well, that's me, perhaps I can do this. So I did, I made the decision to apply and I was accepted. So I can honestly say it was the best decision I ever made. I mean, it's challenging, it's rewarding, and I'm still learning after many years in the job. One of the overriding principles of being a magistrate's court is local justice. Local people being judged by their peers. In other words, people like you and me. So anyone can, you do need certain qualities, but basically anyone can apply to be a magistrate. So I really hope you find this evening helpful. And I look forward to continuing to support events like this in the future, both as the Lady Mayoress, but also whilst continuing with my duties as a JP. Okay, thank you very much.
Joy, thank you very much for that. I'm so pleased that you were taking this on during your term as the Lady Mayor. Okay, thank you again. Just to prove the point that anybody could apply to be a magistrate. So with that in mind, I'm going to speak to Taki Jaffer, who is a former magistrate and well known in this area. Taki.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Taki Jaffer, and as Robert said, I used to be a magistrate at Portsmouth Court, but now work in the healthcare industry. I signed up to become a magistrate in 1992 and have really, really enjoyed my time as a magistrate. And it gave me such an insight into my city that I really enjoyed, and also the connection that I had with my fellow colleagues. The role really helped me develop my own skills, my own analytical skills, my judgment skills, and learned how to work in collaboration with others, which you have to learn to do because you work as a team on the bench and have to be able to follow the evidence trail and to make sure it's understood. And it's always right to ask questions if you're not sure. I had a general appreciation of the law, but and as Joy said, you do not need to have a knowledge of the law per se, because you will have the support of the legal advisor, your colleagues that you sit with, and that is really a supportive community you have there within the organization. And again, the community element is very important. You are local, there are local people in front of you, and you have to use your skills and your knowledge of the local area to deliver local justice as well. At the start of the magistracy, I was really very concerned whether I would be able to do it right as one fears, but with the training and the support received, everything went well, and then I became a chair. And that doesn't mean you are better than any of the other two colleagues. You have an equal weight amongst you all. The role was very fulfilling for me personally, and I felt a great sense of responsibility whilst engaged within the magistracy, which I took very seriously. And you need to utilize your knowledge and your skills to make sure that your judgment is evidence-based when you are making decisions. To help you with this, there is a structured decision-making process that you get trained and you get shown and you have with you at all times. So the fun part is when you first arrive in the magistrate's main meeting room, you get to meet all your magistrates colleagues before you, and it's such a good team environment. Everybody's chatting to each other, shouting over each other, and it's a really jovial environment. And that is your team, but then you have the smaller team which you go to when you go into court, and making sure that everybody's voices is heard is very important. With this project of trying to get more ethnic minorities to join in, it is very, very important. And I can't emphasize enough the need for more people to join in. And this will help our justice system because and it'll be seen to be serving justice if there is a representative, the right representation is on the bench of the local community. Personally, through my engagement with my colleagues, we shared our cultures, customs, and learnt from each other, ensuring a better understanding of each other's faiths, beliefs, or none. And finally, I would greatly encourage, again, members of the BAME communities to apply to become magistrates. It is so rewarding, it is really good, and it's really enjoyable. And I had some great times with my colleagues. And really, as long as you are yourself and being yourself, that is the way forward. That's all I have to say for now. Thank you.
Thank you so much for sharing that personal journey and making sure that people understand that it is everybody that we're trying to get involved here, whatever your diversity. So thank you for that. Next, we will hand over to our three speakers, Sarah Wigley, Nathan Aljo, and Mina Searles, who are all serving magistrates, to talk about the process of becoming magistrates and their experiences. So thank you very much. I think I'll start with Sarah. Sarah?
Good evening, everyone. I'm Sarah Wigley, and I sit with Joy on the Portsmouth or East Hampshire bench. My journey towards becoming a magistrate really started as a young girl. I used to listen to my grandmother tell me about her life as a magistrate, and she sat in the Andover Court, as it was then, in North Hampshire. She used to regale me with interesting and fascinating snippets of a typical day in court, and I realised that she dealt with all aspects of crime, that no day was the same. But above all, she wasn't wishing away her life. She was doing something important, interesting, and relevant. And I think I always knew that one day I wanted to apply too. And it was about 9 years ago that I then did decide to apply, and a year later was being sworn in Winchester's Crown Court. Before I sent in my application form, I went and sat at the back of Portsmouth's remand court for a couple of mornings. I was instantly riveted by the variety of cases, the people involved, and the issues being dealt with, and I knew that it was an environment that I would like to be part of. For any of you in doubt as to whether being a magistrate might be the right thing for you, I strongly urge you to do the same. If you don't find it interesting, then stop right there. But if, like me, you really wanted to find out more, then why don't you? Because observing life in court is just a good way of finding out if you might be interested and suitable. As I think may be mentioned later, the recruitment process is in 2 stages once you've applied. And there's interviews first talking about you as a person, and the second discussing legal scenarios and how you might approach them. It's really important to affirm no legal knowledge is needed in preparation for these, just a good attitude of listening and speaking and giving the selection panel a sense of who you are and what you believe in. I've now been sitting as a magistrate in the criminal court for 8 years and as a presiding justice for a year. And I joined the family bench as well 3 years ago. During COVID, I've been sitting in person in the adult court, but from home remotely as we continue our family court work. I can honestly say too, that being accepted into the magistracy and sitting as a magistrate has been one of the best decisions of my life. It's not proved too time consuming. Typically, it's about 3 days a month. And it can easily be fitted around my work and family life. For instance, I've always sat more in term time and less in the holidays when my 3 boys are at home. And as my children have grown older, I have been able to sit more often, which was one of the reasons I joined the family bench. I've often been asked, what are the main ingredients needed to be a good magistrate? We're a mixed bunch of volunteers of all ages, but we have something in common, and that is we all have common sense and we all have a brain. Formal qualifications are not needed, and nor are formal legal exams or training, but a willingness to learn and be open-minded and fair is needed. Magistrates need to stand up for what they think. Is someone guilty or not? Yes or no? But you also need to be part of a team of 3. And if the other 2 firmly believe in a different outcome, then you need to be flexible enough to listen to them and see that they might be right and that you need to go with the majority. Teamwork is absolutely crucial. I'd go, and from the first time I sat as a real magistrate, I had a third of the vote. I was an equal member of the team. It didn't matter that I had less experience, because invariably I sat with magistrates who did have such experience. What mattered was that I listened, observed, read the documents, and used my common sense to go through the evidence and come out with an answer. So why do I enjoy being a magistrate? Well, no day in court is ever the same. I like sitting with a different two magistrates, and there are still people in Portsmouth I haven't sat with, even though they've been magistrates too for years, because they will always have something interesting to say, and we have lively discussions in the retiring room. My knowledge of the law has gone up stratospherically, and a stimulating day in court certainly keeps my brain well used and exercised. I enjoy being part of the wider team of legal advisors, solicitors, ushers, and probation officers, many of whom have become known and friendly faces over the years. I enjoy doing something interesting and relevant. I don't need to prepare in advance of arriving in court, and when the decisions have been made and the workload dealt with for that day, I can leave with no further follow-up or work to do afterwards. There's no denying that we see a wide-ranging group of defendants and victims in the courtroom, and we do hear about harrowing and difficult times in their lives. But equally, we can make a difference and get some defendants on the road to recovery through rehabilitation programs or working within the community. And it is very important to me to know that someone has received a fair hearing. I want to leave you with a thought that in the knowledge that you all have a brain and have some common sense, and any of you could apply to become a magistrate, why don't you?
Thank you, Sarah. That's a nice way to end. Okay. Very quickly, before I move on and introduce Nathan, just for a moment, I've been asked about how somebody can apply. Sandy, would it be possible just to briefly put up before we get to the end, because I'm conscious of the fact that some people may have to go before we reach the end, just for a brief second, could you put up the contact list, etc.? Can you share that? You able to? Okay. Or am I? Okay, thank you for that. Basically, this is just to give everybody a chance to jot that down in case you have to go early. I noticed there are several questions already starting to build a head of steam up in the chat. By all means, keep doing that. We will answer those when we've gone through all of the users. But for the moment, if you are leaving early, if you just make a note of those, the web link and the email, sw-advisory, advisory @justice.gov.uk. Thank you, Sandy. If you can take that down, we will move on to our next speaker. Thank you for doing that, Sandy. So I now move on to Nathan Aljo. Nathan, over to you.
Thank you, Rob. And you pronounced it right. Not often, but you got it right this evening. Good evening, everyone. My name's Nathan Aljo. I'm a magistrate on the Wiltshire bench. I think you've heard quite a lot about what happens in court and some of the processes. I'm going to give you a bit about me and where I've come from and where I am now. Now, I grew up in Yorkshire in a council estate with my parents. I went to secondary school in the era when grammar schools were the thing, and the government had just changed from grammar schools to secondary schools. Some of us older folks will remember that, possibly. And I left school with not a lot, a few CSEs as they were then. I think they are GCSEs now, and took an apprenticeship as a mechanic. And I worked as a mechanic until I moved to Swindon with the company I worked for. And I've been down here in Swindon ever since, long time ago. Now in Swindon, I took a couple of courses through the Open University in management and finance, and taught myself computing in the days when computing was just about hitting the mainstream in business. Then I left and started my own business and wrote software and retired. However, during my time writing software, local charities got in touch with me to see if I could help them. And on that basis, I started doing some charity work, teaching disabled people to use computers. And that's where my interest in charity work began. Around about the the 2001, the thought of being a magistrate entered my head. I'm not sure where it came from, but it did. But I didn't take the opportunity then. Life kind of steered me in a different direction. So I went abroad and lived there for a few years and came back. Coming back, retired by then, I got bored, got a job in social care. So I went out caring for older people, young disabled people, and joined a union. And it wasn't long before a colleague of mine says, come along to the branch meeting. And before I knew it, I was a steward myself. I sat on the branch committee, and I progressed from there to regional committees and to national committees. However, in 2016-17, I had a talk with my branch secretary who said, I'd really like you to go and study employment law. And at that point, I thought, no, I don't really want to go down the formalities of law. Besides, I'm getting on now, and by the time I've gone through all that studying, I'll be retiring. But what it did do was to trigger the thought I had back in the early 2000s about becoming a magistrate. And at that point, I made the application. Fairly straightforward to do. Attending the interviews wasn't straightforward, not for me anyway. It was somewhat nerve-wracking. But what I did find was those people who were interviewing me were very thoughtful, very kind, very relaxed, and put me at ease. And I think from there, having gone through the interview processes, that is how I have found my colleagues on the Wiltshire bench. They've been very friendly, very thoughtful. So I am a relatively new magistrate in relation to some people. I've been on the bench now for 3 years. Because I'm retired, I had the capacity to sit quite a number of sittings. And at roughly 18 months, I joined the family panel. And again, different varied work in the same way that the criminal side of things is varied, has been mentioned before, but far more interesting. You really get a sense of people and their struggles when you're in the family court. In the last 6 months or so, now let's go back a bit. When I joined, I had planned to be in the magistracy for 5 years. That gives away my age a little bit, because that was at the time the maximum that I could give before retirement. And I actually had an email sent to me from the team when I applied saying, you do realize that you can only give 5 years. And I said, yes, I appreciate you telling me, but I do know my age and I'm not going to be sitting on the sofa watching daytime television for the rest of my life. So I'm still within the time frame for applying. So they just wrote me back and said, fair enough. And here I am. I'm pleased to say when I did actually get through, one of my objectives was we need to move this retirement age. It's just not good enough retiring at 70. And I'm pleased to hear that there is progress on that. And having heard that, I applied to be a mentor. Being a mentor is one of the other duties, along with being an appraiser. There is so many other avenues within the magistracy once you are joined, depending on your particular interest. Now, when I joined, I obviously had a mentor. Everyone has a mentor. They steer you through, point you in the right direction, give you advice, and I've become a mentor precisely for that reason, because I'd like to help the new magistrates as well who have joined, give them advice, point them in the right direction, and hopefully they will enjoy the role and remain. Equally, joining doesn't mean it's a lifetime sentence. You don't have to be there forever. You are in control of your destiny. You join, you enjoy, you leave when you're ready. And that can be any time, or you can progress. Having become a mentor, I also applied to be an appraiser, which is, again, evaluating performances of the new magistrates to see how they are getting on, point them in the right directions in terms of training, certain things I need to look at, etc., etc. And I also applied to be a deputy chair of the family panel. Oh yes, I joined the family panel, if I hadn't mentioned before. So in the 3 years that I have been a magistrate, I'm now the deputy chair of our panel, of the family panel. I'm a mentor, I'm an appraiser, and I sit on FTAC. That's moving somewhat, as some have said. Not everyone has to move that fast, but I have limited time, as I alluded to before. So I'd like to get as much in as I can. As everyone has said so far, the role for me is enjoyable. It certainly keeps the brain active. If you've got an enthusiasm to learn, certainly there is scope here to do that. And there is scope to move into different directions and different areas. And I think in terms of what I need to say, that pretty much covers it. The only other thing I would say is you don't know till you try. And certainly in my case, I certainly wish I had thought about it and done it back in 2000 rather than 2017. Thank you very much.
Nathan, that was a tour de force there, a lot of things. Okay, I love the enthusiasm. I think you did the best advert there, which is you wish you'd taken it up earlier. It's really a fantastic thing. Okay, so we now move on to our last speaker before we move on to questions. So please keep your questions coming in. Mina Searles. Mina, over to you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor. So yes, a great privilege to be invited to this meeting. Thank you very much. Served as 12 years as a magistrate in the Wiltshire community, and also in the wider community, because I do sit cross-county benches. I sit both in criminal courts, family courts, and on Crown Court appeals. I sit as a presiding justice. Besides those sittings, I've chosen to perform other roles that Nathan described earlier on. In the last 10 years, probably, I have carried out many other functions, but my current functions, I have been an appraiser and a mentor for 10 years. I also serve on the Lord Chancellor's Advisory Committee, which our Lord Lieutenant mentioned. And that the main function is around recruiting and interviewing. I also serve on a national committee as a deputy chair on family courts. So I choose to do those extra functions apart from my sittings because I'm so passionate about the magistracy. What brought me to the magistracy was many years ago, I was working as a volunteer with Citizens Advice Bureau. And during that work, it gave me quite a deep insight and awareness of the challenges faced by local communities. And one of the roles I performed was to accompany some people to court. And that further reinstated my belief of the lay justice system. What I found from observing and being there as a participant was that the bench as an equal were very fair, firm, and felt that local justice was being delivered. That really piqued my interest, and therefore I decided to carry out some observations. And I would strongly recommend observations in a court. I think there was a question earlier on whether you could observe, and I would say yes, you can. You have to just make local arrangements. Some courts will arrange for remote observations, other possibly physical ones. But it's public domain information in criminal courts, so anybody can actually go and observe. I carried out 5 observations because I wanted to ensure that I could do this role and I could commit to it. All I can say is after 5 observations, I was hooked and I wanted to carry out doing this role. So I applied. My own, just sort of identifying who I am. My own generational ethnicity spans 2 continents, that's India and Africa. And so I kind of felt, given that diverse culture, positive culture values, and my skill sets, I could bring that to the magistracy because of the observations I had carried out. I found the interview process extremely interesting, stimulating, and challenging, but it's not a vocational interview. It's an easy, not easy in the sense that it's easy, but it's a very different form of interviewing. You have a panel of 3 members, and as my colleague Sarah pointed out earlier on, it's about, the first interview is about finding out who you are, and the second interview is checking your aptitude, judicial aptitude. So there's no legal training required or anything. It's just seeing how you approach, how you apply the criteria. It's about common sense and applying your abilities. So I still remain committed to this and very passionate about this role. It's extremely rewarding, it's extremely challenging, and it will challenge you as a person. I have found personally that it has given me a great deal of growth and development as an individual. Self-reflection, all part of it. But the most important part is the privilege, the extreme privilege of serving as a peer in your community and delivering justice, local justice. When you're delivering that justice, it has to be fair. And you feel at the end of the day, when you finish your sittings and self-reflection, yes, I delivered justice today with my 2 other colleagues as an equal. I was heard, but more importantly, I heard the people. If you have a busy criminal court day, you might be doing quite a lot of cases, and you are actually observing somebody's life, the privilege of getting the details of somebody's life through a short prism of that moment and then making a decision on that. That is indeed a great privilege. I would say I heard our Lord Mayor say about urging at the beginning about justice being fair in our local community and inviting all of you to apply and say, please step forward. I would say how I approach every sitting is with humility, confidence of the training, due diligence, objectivity, and above all, common sense and a great deal of commitment to the role. When I say commitment, what I'm talking about is the commitment that you have taken a judicial oath to be fair and to deliver justice without any fear or ill favor. That is the underlying oath that you take as a judicial office holder and to the role. The qualities I just described, you may all just identify those with those qualities because you may apply those in your personal life and in your work life. So it's something that we can all do. You can all apply for this. It's not a question of whether I can do it, am I the right person? The uniqueness of the magistracy is that there is no hierarchy when you join. On the day one, when you're first appointed and you're first sitting, you're an equal. And you always remain an equal. There's no seniority, there's no hierarchy. And on our Wiltshire bench, I can tell you when I turn up for a sitting, I could be sitting with a doctor, a bus driver, a postman, a housewife, a teacher, a civil servant, and I can reel off a whole long list. But there is everybody from different backgrounds, different social groups, ethnicity, diversity, and that's what makes us so unique. The uniqueness of the lay justice system is so brilliant. It's so outstanding. It's world-renowned. The fact that people, lay people like us, can step up, do this role, and carry on with our personal lives and our work lives. What other type of justice system offers that to people? In terms of the moving forward in this role is you can take up any other roles that you wish to. And as a mentor, new magistrates who are appointed, I would hold their hand through the process and sit with them 6 sittings through that time, which would be a process of 12 to 18 months, so that you're not left on your own when you join. You've had the training and then you get that mentored, holding hands, however much is needed, and take somebody through that process. And then it goes on to an appraisal process. So that's all I've got to say. And I'll be very happy to answer questions. Thank you very much, Lord Mayor.
Mina, thank you so much. That was really, again, another tour de force. And I must say, I love some words you used there about the day you join, you're equal. That's so, great to hear. And the fact that doing it is a privilege, and you heard the people. Those are words that we can all do, and that's why it's so important in this role. So thank you. I'm going to thank all our speakers there, because they brought something different and the diversity we're looking for. So thank you very much, Sarah, Nathan, and Mina. Thank you so much for your passion there. And I hope that's rubbed off on everybody out there. So we're now going to move on to some Q&A, question and answer session right now. And I know we've had some questions already put there, and Mina partly answered the question. One of the common themes is, can you go and watch this, watch a court proceedings? And one of the sub parts of that was during COVID, etc. on that one. So would the panel, somebody on the panel like to answer, Sean or somebody like that?
So I can answer. Obviously, with COVID, there have been restrictions in place, both in terms of people not being able to make essential journeys, and going to observe wouldn't potentially be an essential journey. To counter that, we created a system of people observing from the comfort of their own home via a video platform. So you're actually, it's like watching, you're zooming into the court and it's just like you're there. And we will run that again for future recruitment campaigns, because although on the 17th measures are effectively ending to some degree, we are aware that there are people out there who still might be nervous about going into public areas. So we will offer that facility for people to be able to watch by video from home. Courts are open. They are open. Justice is important. So yes, following the 17th, you're more than welcome to come and join us. Just be cautious that we will still have restrictions about the number of people who can enter a courtroom. But if so, you may turn up and it may be very busy, and somebody could technically be turned away because of
the number of people, but I've not seen that happen as of yet. And actually, if you give the court a ring and say, look, what's sitting that day, and get some idea of what type of work is on, they'll help indicate whether it's a good day to come down and observe. Okay, just one word, picking up on what Mina said, what you can't do is observe a family court because they are closed courts, because of the nature of the things that are being discussed. In terms of family, there is online research you can do, some online videos that you can watch will give you a good idea of what the family courts do, which is in the Become a Magistrate website, and it'll give you a link to those websites and information pages that you can find. Okay, does that answer that?
Sean, can I just summarize then? So for instance, there are two things you said there. People can go along to certain and observe. So knowing how they can do that would be interesting. Do they just turn up? The other one is people might just want a taster. You know, they're not sure right now, but want a taster. You offered an online sort of thing. Are they able to do that? How would they go about that?
Yeah, well, first of all, with regards to courts, they are open. Important principle in English, British law is open justice, and people can walk in on the street and see being justice administered. So as a member of the public, you can go into any criminal court, sit down and observe. My only caveat was that we have restricted access because of keeping people still distancing from each other. So the number of seats in the public observation areas are reduced at this moment in time. So yes, you can go down, tick us to the 17th and observe the court in operation. With regards, if you want to observe by CVP, Common Video Platform, Zoom into the court, if you email the email address that was put up earlier, and we'll put it again later on, I'll get back to you with arrangements and explain how that can be done, and we'll put those measures in place on an individual basis. Okay.
Thank you, Sean. So really, this is open to the panel. Just on that basis there, Mina, you said you attended several just to get a taste of yourself beforehand, and that hooked you in. I want to open up the panel, Mina, Nathan and Sarah, about whether they did a similar thing, very briefly, just so we get an idea of how you did that journey.
If one of my colleagues wants to go first.
I'm happy to jump in here. Possibly as the latest joiner in terms of the panel, my recollection is that the application form actually suggests that you visit the court and observe at least 2, possibly 3, but that is a minimum, I think, and I think it would be wise for anyone thinking of applying to actually just go and see how it works from the outside before you complete your application.
Thank you, Nathan.
Can I, sorry, just help on that, that's all right, because you are required to do an observation as part of the application process. So at the moment, it's been reduced to 1 because of COVID, but ordinarily it's 2 observations in a criminal court, and you are required to do the online research. So it is something you have to do as part of the application process. Okay, sorry, apologies.
Yeah, thank you, Sean, and thank you, Nathan. Mina and Sarah, did you want to add anything to that?
Yes, I'd like to just add, I did mention earlier that I found it absolutely fascinating. And the 2 types of law I would strongly recommend you try and look at are, one is what we call remand court, or court number 1. And the ushers at the reception of the building will help direct you when you arrive. And in court 1, you see people who've been remanded into the cells overnight and have to be dealt with within 24 hours. And sometimes you see some sentencing going on too, or people who come in with a guilty plea. And that means you've probably got probation and police as well involved, and decisions being made, and it's an interesting and busy court. The other court that's well worth going to is if you can find a good trial going on, so that you see how the 2 sides of an argument are presented. And you'll probably start off hearing the prosecution speak and think, oh, they're guilty. And then the defense will get up and you'll think, oh my goodness, they really didn't do it. And it's a very good illustration of the way that we have to listen to all the evidence before making a decision. So if you can, try and vary what you see in court, because it will really help give you a good flavour of what we do.
Thanks, Sarah. And Mina, you did say earlier, was there anything else you needed to add?
Yes, thank you very much. Just with my advisory committee hat on, I would just say that as Sean pointed out, you need to have at least done one minimum observation in the current conditions, COVID conditions. But at the first interview, you will be asked about your observations and what you saw. So it's very valuable to keep some notes about those observations. Thank you.
Thank you, Mina. Just as a follow-up on that one, maybe this is for Sean or others. Sean, there was a question rather than from Shri, which is our local courts have closed, so we no longer have local knowledge. Now, obviously, I understand that there are two parts to that question about locality of the court. The fact is, I think you will explain that applying for the magistrates is quite wide-ranging, and even within the courts that you attend, there is a lots of areas. Is that right?
There are, and I think Sarah referred to East Hampshire, and it says East Hampshire Magistrates Court that you're actually assigned to in this area, which obviously covers a wider area than Portsmouth. You know, if you don't live in the East Hampshire, you may well fall into the Southampton or the North Hampshire, the Basingstoke area. So at some point, you are going to be living in an area that has a magistrates court connected to it. Now, magistrates court, on the second part of that question, in terms of local knowledge, the areas are bigger, and the local issues within that area come within the East Hampshire. So it may be, you know, issues, inner city issues, or more countryside issues that may be relevant issues that you can talk about in interviews. So it all is encompassed within local knowledge and what comes within the demographic and the makeup of an area. Okay.
Lord Mayor, there are two questions that are linked to this. One of them is, does it count if you have observed out of the area that you want to be a magistrate? Does it count if you observe as a professional? And linked to that, do we need to live in Portsmouth if we want to apply to be a Portsmouth magistrate?
Is that for you, Sean, or can the others jump in?
I can deal with it, or one of the others. It's first of all, with regard to the observation, as long as it doesn't have to be the local court. I think it's useful to observe in the local court, but what is important is that the observation is fairly recent. So if it was 2 or 3 years ago, that's not good enough. It's got to be relevant to the application. So if it was a long time ago, I would advise that you do need to do another observation. It doesn't really matter where the magistrates court is. The magistrates court is a magistrates court, but ideally it would be good to pop into your local court. So the next question was?
If you have observed as a professional.
Yeah, it counts, but I think what I would say to that is, if you have observed as a professional, you've gone there to fulfill a particular role. Now, the role of magistrate and observing for a decision as to whether you apply and it's something for you, I think you may look at things in a different way, and observe in a different way, and notice different things. So I would suggest it would be good to go and observe with applying in mind, just to see if you do see different things and you spot different things and you pick up on much more. Because attending as a professional, you're engaged, you're there for a reason, and you're probably focused on the role you are doing or there to do. So I would advise go and observe as for the purposes of the application.
Okay, thank you for that. Just as a follow-up, Sean, and I want to ask Sarah and Joy, because obviously they're local in Portsmouth, and that question, because people are probably trying to figure out where you go and sit, if that makes sense to you. Joy and Sarah, because you're from Portsmouth, can you give us an idea? Because I guess some people will think about locality.
Well, obviously,
Joy, you're going to have to go much nearer to the mic.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, if you live in Portsmouth, then that's ideal, because Portsmouth is cool. But because we do have that bigger area, we obviously handle people, out of Portsmouth, from Fareham, Gospel, Avent, and all the surrounding area. So yeah, if you live anywhere in that bigger area, then yeah, that's fine. Come to Portsmouth.
Yes, so just to back that up, I live 12 miles north of Portsmouth, So it's actually a very easy journey for me. I drive in, but I don't live actually in Portsmouth, which might also address another question I've seen in the chat box. You are quite unlikely to recognise people in court, but you get a chance to look at your court list on the morning. And if there are any names coming up that you know in any professional or personal capacity, then you just tell your colleagues and you opt out and don't sit in on that one. So you do have a chance to make sure that you're not directly involved with anyone you know. But sorry if this is meandering off the point a tiny bit. We have a separate entrance, and so we leave and enter a different door from the main door of reception, and we have our own car park that's linked to that. So we are actually quite safe. So I sometimes get asked whether, you know, we're in danger of sort of bumping into people. We really don't. So just to satisfy any other questions on that.
Sarah and Joy, thank you very much. I mean, those answered quite a few questions that people would want about, you know, how you vet what you're going to be judging and where you're going to be judging and if people are involved. So obviously people can find out more of that if they go and apply, because obviously those are pretty straightforward questions that most people will have, and you will be walked through that if you want to apply or ask further questions. One of the things I just want to open up to all the panel is one of the questions I can see. I am currently a qualified probation officer with court experience. Do you think it would be a conflict of interest to consider applying or useful with my skill set? So that's a double-edged question, whether the skill of what somebody does helps, and on the other one, whether particularly doing a job bars you from doing that. Does anybody know?
Yeah, I do.
Thank you, Sean.
Yeah, there's what's called the eligibility criteria, and there's certain roles that bar someone from being a magistrate. I think somebody in the chat quite rightly put, you know, a police officer, the clear conflict between that role and being a magistrate, and there are other couple of roles as well, such as a crime prosecutor and police community support officers, and actually bailiffs as well, can't apply, and their jobs make them ineligible. Other roles, eligibility depends on circumstances, but what tends to happen there is you can be appointed, but the Lord Chancellor will attach conditions to your role. So let's take an example of perhaps somebody who works for a local authority, for Portsmouth, for example. They will be appointed, they're entitled to be appointed, but the Lord Chancellor will say, okay, you can sit as a magistrate, but you can't deal with cases that arise out of prosecutions involving Portsmouth City Council, because Portsmouth City Council has prosecute certain offenders, can't deal with council tax cases, things like that. So to keep the impartiality, independence, you're excluded from dealing with those types of cases. There is no bar to a probation officer sitting, but obviously what we couldn't have is a situation of a probation officer sitting in the court they actually work in. So if, for example, they are a magistrate court probation officer preparing reports for the court in Portsmouth, you wouldn't want them being a magistrate in Portsmouth because there's a conflict with their day job. You know, so they also may recognise lots of the defendants as well would have to declare an interest and stand down from that case. And actually, that's a point that somebody mentioned earlier, just to expand upon about what happens if you see someone in a conflict. You alert the legal advisor and your colleague to that conflict, and you step down from that case. So it protects your integrity, protects the defendant as well from being dealt with by somebody they know. So I think that answers that in terms of eligibility. Okay.
Mina, were you going to say something?
Sorry, beg your pardon. No, thank you very much. I think Sean's covered it. Thank you.
Okay, Sean, can I just check? Somebody put in the word social worker, question mark. So I assume that's, is that very quickly, is that a allowable?
Eligible with, possibly with conditions, or with conditions will be attached. It's eligible to apply.
Right, thank you for that. Sandy, I've lost where I am. Okay, what questions have we?
Yes, sorry, I was just going to go to the same one. Something about the interview. Can you give any examples of questions that may be asked at interview, and what sort of qualities are looked for?
Okay, so I'm going to ask the speakers, the panel, apart from Sean, what they were asked, the type of thing, if they can remember the type of questions they were asked. I think, Mina, you started on this process.
Yes, thank you. So thank you very much. From an advisory committee point of view, as I indicated earlier on, the first interview is about asking getting to know the candidate, so getting to know more about themselves. My personal experience of the interview process was, the question I was asked is, they knew from my application that I had a teenage son, and I was asked, what did he say? What is his attitude? What does he think about you applying for a magistrate? And is your family supportive of this? And I quoted my son's own words, which was, "Go for it, mom." And I was also asked questions about what was my attitude around drugs, prostitution, and mental health. So these are fairly probing questions. And it's about looking at where you stand and what are your attitudes about things like that. Then on the second interview, as I said, it's all about the aptitude. You are given a case study to look at and a ranking exercise, which is a set of 10 offences you look at, but you're given time beforehand to look at those. And then the panel will interview on those. But that's when I indicated earlier, we're looking for the judicial aptitude about how you approach that, what criteria you have applied, and what you think are more serious offences. So there are no right or wrong answers, but we're just checking about the candidate's aptitude towards that. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mina. Can I ask, because I'm wary of the time on that one, were there anything succinctly they want to add? Sarah, Nathan, or Joy?
One quick question I was asked, which I thought was a very interesting one in the personal interview, was whether I had any prejudices or unconscious bias or conscious bias. And I suppose the tendency might be that you jump in and go, no, I'm very fair and, you know, very level-headed. But of course, we all do have prejudices. And I thought that was a really interesting question. And that provoked a good discussion. And I realized that often the questions I was asked, there wasn't a right or wrong. It was just, could you think on your feet, answer something that perhaps you hadn't prepared for, and then have a discussion with the panel involved. They weren't trying to catch you out. They genuinely wanted to find out how you think. And the individual versus team decision making was another area that was explored. You know, can you think on your feet for yourself, but are you prepared to listen to a different argument? And I was very much struck by those qualities as well. Thank you.
Nathan and Joy, or are you happy to move on?
Very succinctly, if I may, Rob, my advice would be to any applicant, be yourself, be honest with yourself, be truthful, because that's what you're going to have to be if you become a magistrate. There are some deep questions that are asked, certainly in my case, in the interview, and we had some fairly lively discussion around those questions and the answers. Don't be afraid to speak your mind, say what you think, and they will accept it for what it is.
Thank you for that, Nathan. Joy, I presume, does that cover everything?
Yeah, I don't think about anything about that.
Okay, that's fine. There is a question on here, which is I'm going to try and join it up, which is when are you opening up applications for this? I.e., when is the opening date that you want applications? Somebody said, why are you asking for trying to recruit 3 times the amount of places there are? And on top of that is, how many magistrates are there in Portsmouth? So I guess this, Sean, this is a you one. Okay, does that all make sense? When you're opening, why are you asking for 3 times the amount, and how many other?
Oh, I lost you there. First of all, in terms of the recruitment campaigns, we don't have a rolling recruitment campaign. We run 4 campaigns a year, 2 for family, 2 for crime. The next crime campaign opens in early September, and the next family campaign will open in early 2022. It seems a long time away, but what that does is gives people plenty of time to discuss, to carry out the observations, inquire about the role, and then to do court observations indicated, and also to discuss with employers, if employed, the role in itself. Now, the campaign will be open for 8 weeks, and you can find out about when we're running the campaign, when it starts, and how long it's open for on the website, information that was put up earlier. In terms of why we interview more than we are seeking, well, that's simply because not everybody's successful. And we obviously look to interview more people. We look to, but when we look for people to interview, those who meet the basic criteria and are successful in the sitting and given interviews, obviously that may be more than the people we need. And it's then the best of those that we will obviously interview, and hopefully the best of the ones that are successful. So that is simply why we interview more, which I think is a fairly standard practice throughout interviewing generally. In terms of how many magistrates there are in Portsmouth, you've got me on that one. It's 100 plus, and I think Joy might have the answer. I'm hoping Joy will have the answer to that. But in terms of how many, I think somebody else has put, how many we're looking to interview, or how many we're looking to recruit.
I think it's about 160 for Portsmouth.
Thank you. No, thank you for saving me. In terms of how many we're looking to recruit at the next campaign, we don't have that figure yet. That's worked out on a number of factors, such as how many magistrates have retired, the increase in work, and we are very busy in the courts. And that figure will be available prior to the launch of the campaign, but it's not yet with us. But it's not 1 or 2, it's a number that we're looking for to join us as magistrates. Okay.
Okay, and I think it would be worth saying anyway that if you have got a lot of good applicants and you're trying to pick the best of the best, do you keep the others on file? Because also the other thing is, if I remember correctly, you do also ask people if they're willing to work out of an area. It doesn't have to be just located in Portsmouth. You have a, depends how wide you throw the net effectively to have magistrate. Is that correct?
Yeah, we will. I mean, if for example, there's a shortfall in a neighbouring area, we'll ask people if they want to sit in that area. Yeah, we will do that. Which at the moment I have to say that we've not had a problem with an oversubscription as of late. So yeah, we will look to accommodate where we can, and particularly if you live near the borders, sometimes it's just as easy to go to North Hampshire or Southampton. It's not particularly difficult for people, and people are quite happy to do that. But yes, we will do that.
Right, sorry, Sean, while I've got you on, I'm trying to fit as many questions as well. Somebody talked about, first of all, they won't be available until half term to go and observe. Will that delay? And then somebody is on the back of that said, do you tend to do the work in single one-off days or block periods of a number of days? How does that get coordinated? So both are time-bound questions. If you could be succinct, because I'm trying to get one more question in.
Yeah, the answer to that is no. Bearing in mind the campaign's opening in September, you've got plenty of time to do that. And I know, I'm not can't remember when the half terms are, etc. But no, that won't be a bar to you. Won't be a problem. It shouldn't be a problem. So the second part of the question was
whether we sit in day blocks.
Yes.
Yes. So that's a really, really good question. First of all, the minimum sitting requirement we ask is 13 days per year. In total, that's the minimum, but we do hope that people want to and are able to sit more. Now, in terms of how you sit, we like them for competence reasons to be spread throughout the year if possible, but we understand certain people, for example, somebody who's a teacher might want to concentrate their sittings in non-term time areas, and we'll look at making adjustments for those people to accommodate their jobs. Now, one important point in terms of how do people fit this around their daily life, magistrate sittings are rotated. They're rotated well in advance, and magistrates opt to sit when it suits them and is convenient to them, so they can work around their sittings, their jobs and their daily life. So it is all very organised, and I think the magistrates will probably tell you a lot more about this that are with us today. So yes, there's a rota system. It is very well organised, and it is designed to work around your life and their working life, rather than their working life working around the magistrates' court. Okay.
Thank you, Sean. Taki, very quickly, you wanted to address the question around locals knowing locals, etc. Taki, do you want to say a few
Yes,
quick
it's
words
just,
there, and then I'll move on to the last one?
Yes, I had a retail shop in Portsmouth in Southsea, and I being at the front, it was a news agency, and I used to regularly meet a lot of my customers before me, because there was some estates nearby me where people came from to in front of me, and in a lot of cases I was able to step down, but in some of the cases I had to sit simply because those people were well known to all of my other colleagues as well, because there were such repeat offenders. So there is that issue that comes up as well. But also what I've found is those who tend to know you then tend to be more wary and know you're a magistrate, and therefore sort of tend to stay away from you.
Thank you for that, Taki. That's the good explanation there. So I really want to just move on to the panel, any of the panel members, they just quickly go through. There have been questions about what qualities do you think are needed, apart from being a team player, or there was a question about roles, you know, what sort of roles may help out. I might have got that wrong somewhere if I can find it, but there was a question about really a qualitative nature of things that you would help. So if I can start with Sarah and then move through quickly as the final question, I will say all the other questions we will be putting up, you can ask further on.
I think the Lord Mayor may have frozen his screen, but
and we'll be writing to people with any questions we have.
Whoops, sorry to step in. I think you froze briefly. So just to reiterate the qualities, is just, I think you need to be a relatively calm person who is capable of listening. You need to be observant, and I think you need to be a little bit curious, because maybe if it's a trial, you need to, it's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle where you're trying to put the pieces together, work out what happened and what is the fair outcome. And if you have that slight curiosity, you want to listen and be observant and listen to the detail and find out, you know, whether someone did that crime or not, then that's certainly a useful feature. And, you know, the ability to concentrate in court. And as it really does come down to that, some sort of clear thinking that you have of yourself, but also the fact that you will listen to other people and respect their decision. So respect for your colleagues is also very important. And a sense of fairness, obviously.
Yeah, I think I'm back. Have we? Sorry about that. Right at the end there, you lost me. So, Sarah, did we have anybody else who wanted to speak about? Have we still got an audience? Sandy.
Yes, we do. If you want to ask for any closing comments and go from there.
I understand what Sarah's said. Can I add something to what Sarah was saying? Basically, yes, being calm is I'd say one of the best qualities to have. But also you must not judge somebody by appearances. You must be prepared to be a good listener. And yes, the team player bit is very important, and concentrated. So yeah, I really endorse what Sarah said.
Thank you, Joy. Nathan.
Yes, there's been a couple of questions in the box that we haven't covered concerning what are the challenges. The challenges are, in my opinion, the constant learning. There is some, you're trained before you start anyway. Training is an integral part of the role. It is ongoing and it never ends because the law changes, society's view changes, and we are all on top of that. And for me, one of the challenges is keeping on top of all of the changes that come about fairly frequently at the moment, mostly through COVID, but there's lots of things go on. And Training is always a thing that you have to keep going, and that keep ahead of what's going on. That is, for me, the major challenge of the role. Nonetheless, enjoyable. You need to remember it and apply it. And learning is an ongoing process of life. If you enjoy learning, you enjoy challenges, maybe you should make an application.
Thank you for that, Nathan. Mina, while you're there, Mina, you might also answer the question that's just come in about how do employees, are they amenable? Mina, have you got some words you want to say there?
Thank you very much. Yes, I would echo what my colleagues have said. I would say that you need to be open-minded, a good listener, a good communicator, a team player, and above all, remain very objective. Apply common sense. That's all that requires in this job. And it's never forget that you're always learning. You never finish learning in this role. Always new challenges. No one case is the same. Thank you very much. It's a great privilege to be here. Thank you. That's
great. Taki, do you want any closing things? And I'm just going to go to, if anybody wants to jump in after Taki to sort of say about how your employees were as short as possible. Taki.
Just take on one of the questions, the challenges. One of the things that one has to bear in mind, when you're sitting, you hear some absolutely horrendous cases. And one of the things as human beings, we might want to take it home, but the thing is you must not, because that's one of the major challenges, that you have to walk away and leave behind what the case is, and what you've heard and how harrowing it might be sometimes. You just have to do that, and you have to be able to do that to be a successful magistrate. Otherwise, it just eats away at you.
Thank you, Taki. While we're going to ask Sean about, we're going to just say to everybody their experience very quickly, the experience of employees thing. Sandy, can you just put up that web address? I'm just keen to cover people who may want to ask other questions or find out things. For instance, how do you apply, or can you get help? If they go to the link, or in fact write into the email thing, they will get all that sound advice, or even write into the, if you're having trouble getting information, right into the Lord Mayor's office, all one word, at portsmouthcc.gov.uk. So can I just ask quickly, can somebody answer the question, which is a very relevant one, about the attitude of employees to giving you time? Does anybody want to quickly jump in there?
Yeah, I can jump in there. I found, when talking to a lot of magistrates, that it does vary, unfortunately. I mean, I was lucky, I worked in the civil service, and they were very, very understanding, and I got a lot of paid time off to do this. Other companies aren't quite so generous, and I know a few colleagues who've had to be very clever about how they work around this, do some as leave, for instance, and not get so many paid days off. So unfortunately, there isn't sort of a law that says you've got to give your employee paid leave to do this, but you can claim loss of earnings. So if you really have a not so nice employer, or if you are self-employed, you can claim loss of earnings. Okay.
Thank you, Joy. And one really quite important one right at the end there. I know I'm just running over slightly, but great questions. What support is available for magistrates who are sitting through a very traumatic case, e.g. debriefing, supervision? Again, if somebody could, one of you could jump in.
Thank you very much. I just may answer that. The process is that we have a court pre-briefing and a post-briefing after court has finished. So you are in a safe forum to be able to discuss a case that may have had some impact on the bench with your legal advisor. I want to add that when a bench retires to make a decision, that process of making that decision is just between the three of you. Even the legal advisor is not a part of that within the criminal courts. So that decision and how you arrive at that must not be ever discussed outside of that room. The other part about how, handle any trauma is you have the mentor you can go and speak to in your early years, but also the debrief is with your colleagues. So there's a peer group support as well. And you also can address that further through a legal advisor if you wish to. So there is support system within the courts available. Thank you.
Thank you for answering that. Right, I'm conscious that we've overrun, but that's because we've had some great questions. I just want to reiterate to everybody, Sandy, if you want to take that down now, hopefully everybody will have got that name address there, and clearly we've given enough direction. Everybody can write into me as the Lord Mayor's office at portsmouthcc.gov.uk if they didn't get anything, and I'll put it across to the right people. But you can obviously follow up at that web address and get help. We will be putting this recording out so people can review it. And what I want to do first of all is just thank all our speakers today. So that is the Lord Lieutenant of Hampshire, Nigel Atkinson, Deputy Lady Mayoress, Joy Maddox, Taki Jaffa, Sarah Wigley, Nathan Aljo, and Mina Sills. Thank you to Sean for the magistrate service. That was great. Sandy Davis and the Hive, Chip Ahmed Khan, community development worker for Portsmouth City Council, for their assistance, and Joe, who was helping out and has left now just to make sure we had enough room in setting this event up and carrying out the technical side to this meeting. I just want to say thank you to everybody. It's been very interesting, but more importantly, we're looking for people to follow up. This is really important, and even if it's not now, make sure you spread the news, and please pass this on to other people that you think could be interested when we do the recruitment. So I just want to thank you, and thank you very much for joining us this evening. Thank you.